This is the Deliberate Talks Weekly Podcast, powered by the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. Tune in every week to learn something new about digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And now, over to the voice of your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to a new week at the studio of the Deliberate Talks podcast. And this is your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya, who in today's episode is going to host a very interesting guest who has achieved so much in her career already and paved her way to build a great SaaS product for universities. And while we prep up for our dialogue with her on student hostel management software, here are some few interesting conversations about SaaS products. Globally, the size of the SaaS market, which stood at $100 billion in 2019, is growing at 22.6% according to a recent NASSCOM report. Moreover, the report states that the domestic market for SaaS India is likely to expand 6 times to $13 to $15 billion by 2025. Also, SaaS firms raised around $2.10 billion in funding between January and October 2020 compared to $1.70 billion in 2019, according to a data from Traxon. And now, let's get straight into a conversation with our guest today. Today, we have someone who is the co-founder and the CEO of the mobile and web app SpaceBasic. She was also a TEDx speaker, a speaker at the United Nations Youth Summit, and has her name in the Forbes Asia 30 Under 30. She was also named as one of the top 60 women transforming India by the Indian government and the United Nations. Here's introducing Madhavi Shankar. Hello, Madhavi.
Hi, Dakshin. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. Welcome to the Deliberate Talks podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
Great being here. Thank you.
So, Madhavi, you have had a great personal and a professional journey so far. Firstly, tell me, how did you plan your entrepreneurial journey to becoming where you are today?
Well, that's a good question. For me, entrepreneurship was never planned per se. I think I kind of stumbled onto it. So a little bit about my background is, like most of us, engineering student from India. I pursued my engineering here in Bangalore. When I was studying, the two major kind of mainstream career paths were engineering or medicine, right? Mm-hmm. So by default, I had to get into engineering, not my grades 1, grade 4 medicine, though both my parents are doctors, and then I kind of pursued it anyway, not for passion, but just as is. Mm-hmm. But then after which I moved to Australia to further my education, and I studied my master's in engineering, and I did an MBA after that. And What I learned when I was in Sydney is the whole aspect of independent thinking, independent being, and really making decisions on our own. Because when we're in India, when you're making decision making, it's never on our own. It's always influenced by, it could be parents, friends, society, etc. So we seldom get to exercise the power of independent thinking, which I feel like I had great exposure to when I was in Sydney. Experiences, right? Good and bad, both. And I think I learned from that. And while I was there, I started interning for a very early stage startup. So remember, this is 2012, and startup was not a buzzword back then. Right. So it was a small company, and I was one of the founding employees there. I think it was the second or the third they hired. Mm-hmm. So I really kind of played many roles. And I loved it, door-to-door sales, receptionist, testing, QA, all of it, right? Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where my love for startups really began. And that was my first-hand experience into startups and entrepreneurship. So I got to kind of really work very closely with my CEO, CTO, COO, and really directly report to them. And that's where I really learned about what entrepreneurship is and what startups really are.
Right. Okay. And how does it feel starting young? Like, did you feel also that you could give in a couple of more years in terms of working and then getting into entrepreneurship? Or do you think it was the right time that you jumped in and everything fell in place? How did that planning come into the picture?
I mean, to be honest, I wish I started sooner, but that's always the case.
Right.
But having said that, I think it's important to kind of have that experience. When I say that, what I mean is have that exposure to working for a startup. Just like be there and learn and have that exposure. And I think I had that before I started up. So it wasn't new to me. So some of the things that I did for SpaceBasic was kind of thought through, or I have seen from the outside in the previous company that I worked for. So I think for me, just having that startup experience before I started my company. So I started SpaceBasic when I was 27. This is back in 2017. And no regrets, but what I see is, students and people have that exposure and they kind of know that this is a career choice. They can pursue it. But we kind of, at least for me, I kind of stumbled into it. And entrepreneurship or startups was not one of the go-to kind of options, at least back then.
Right. And how did your parents react to this when you said you want to become an entrepreneur?
Well, honestly, I didn't really tell them. So what happened was I was in Sydney, and 4.5 years after working for this company, it was pretty well established. We went from a small team to, almost 100 employees in different locations. So things started working on autopilot.
Right.
And for me, that's when I felt like I kind of missed that hustle that we used to do initially in the beginning. So I just felt like that was the right time for me to start something. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, etc. But that was just, an afterthought. And I got introduced to my now co-founder, who is in the Bay Area, successful entrepreneur, woman entrepreneur. So I was very kind of, smitten by her profile. So I wrote to her, I got a meeting with her, and I was visiting the Bay Area. And that's when I met with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it's just going to be a casual interview, but casual chat. And it kind of ended up being, back-to-back meetings, a couple of brainstorm meetings, and we had a rough business plan good to go. That week I was in San Francisco. So it kind of happened by chance, though I didn't see the goal was to go to San Francisco, was get to do some sightseeing, which didn't quite happen. But what did happen was said she's going to do this with me. And before she could change her mind, I moved back to Sydney, packed my bags, and, came straight to India. So my parents had no idea that, what they signed up for as of now.
Nice. But they must be really proud of where you are today. So that's all fell in the right place at the right time.
Yes, I agree.
Absolutely. You mentioned about SpaceBasic, and it's a very interesting concept. Firstly, why did you see the need of such a product in a market like India to begin with? Also, where did you begin your research from, and what was the learning, and what was the problem statement that you identified there?
So, so in 2016, when I came back, we were trying to do due diligence. Really, the goal was to find out what is the problem that we'll be solving, and is the problem big enough that we can get customers to pay us to solve their problem.
Mm-hmm.
So, both Indu and I were very passionate about the education space. We really wanted to do something there, especially keeping students in mind, because I had a great experience as an international student, and I could draw differences, when I studied in India. So the goal was to see what we can do around education and student experiences, besides just giving back to the community and being a part of the economic growth here, because that's the time where a lot of companies were shifting to India, and India market was, still is one of the most potential markets today. And besides all of that, we really wanted to solve a problem in the education space using technology. So when I started doing due diligence, I would have spoken to about, 100 students, universities, schools, colleges. And we started with a different problem, but we kind of ended up in the hostel space. And I understood very quickly that there was a very consistent kind of manual or very labor intensive kind of way of managing student hostels and dorms, right? And that also happens to be a very important or integral part of a university or a college in terms of revenue wise. And it was often neglected in terms of the way it's managed. It was still very ad hoc, very manual, and very word of mouth, paper driven. So we realized that not only in the smaller colleges or mid-size or well-known or lesser well-known, it was a trend from the best to the tier 2, tier 3.
Right.
And so we caught that, and we signed up 3 pilot customers, and we said, hey, look, we will solve this for you. We just really want to understand this really closely.
Mm-hmm.
So when we started doing that, we saw a lot of similarities in terms of the way it was managed, like smaller tasks, for example, complaints, right, or maintenance requests. It was written in a book across all these 3 universities or colleges. And so things like that. So we noticed a pattern. Then we thought, yes, we can definitely solve this with tech. And we went ahead and we built MVP. We ran it closely with these 3 universities who till today, 3 years after, are still our customers. So that's where I think the idea that kind of really turned into a product, and now which is growing. So that's how SpaceBasic started.
Nice. And you've worked and studied in Australia as well, that you mentioned. How is it different in comparison to the educational institutes here? Do you see a potential market to expand there too? And what are the different concerns for a hostel management platform between there and here?
Right. So what I see here is, over here we're going from paper to digital, but overseas, what we've noticed is it's digital, but it's fragmented. So what we're trying to do here in India is we're trying to automate day-to-day tasks and day-to-day communication in one workspace, because there are multiple touch points here, and we kind of want to integrate that. And things like this are recurring. And at the end of the day, our mantra at SpaceBasic is educators and administrators should be spending more time with students, and I'm kind of helping them achieve their goal instead of doing redundant tasks and
Right.
redundant work.
Right.
So with SpaceBasic, it solves exactly that. So it kind of takes away the manual redundancy and things like that, makes it more effective, cost effective, time effective, and really gives you insights which you would have not have gotten if you continue to do the processes like you were. So we are in the process of validating the US market and the Australian market. And, we have been speaking with a couple of potential customers. So like I said, they do have a solution, but it's digital, but it's fragmented. So our goal is to kind of tie it up all together and really give them the same valuable insights that Indian customers get, which right now is still a gap in the US or the Australian market.
Right. And how unorganized is this sector today in India?
I think it's safe to say fairly unorganized, very manually driven. It's all verbal, permissions is verbal, tasks are verbal. So goal of being efficient is kind of lost in this process. And I think the way what COVID has really taught a lot of us is efficiency, right? In a way, because we had to do with lesser resources, we had to do with less of everything and make the best of it. And at least for us, so we had to optimize our processes. We had to, as startups, we have to do it. We had to pivot. So with the same thought process, I feel like in this unorganized sector lies an opportunity where they are able to kind of churn their data, gain valuable insights, kind of make decisions, data-driven decisions, which was completely non-existent before. So I feel like a lot of our customers are really kind of getting used to that and are really liking this aspect of working, because back then it was out of no choice, and now they have a choice to kind of digitize and go kind of the automated way.
Right. Interesting aspect of the COVID part of it. The business model like yours last year with universities shut, classes going online, students going back home. What is the structure like, and how is it shaping for you this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, it was difficult for everybody. It was unforeseen, and it was something that we all had to deal with. But the real kind of challenge was to pivot and pivot fast. And what are we going to pivot into? Because remember, we work with universities and school dormitories, hostels, and students were all back home and things like that. So what we ended up doing, we started opening up the same existing features we had for the entire university and college. We also kind of started providing SpaceBasic as a solution to independent student housing communities and co-living spaces and things like that. What we saw was with our existing customers, adoption in terms of using the communication aspect of, because the way we've built it is super lightweight, heavily configurable. we believe in, making a workflow that works for you versus, just force feeding a product and say, hey, this is the way that you've got to do. And that's what we've learned from working with universities here.
Mhm.
So we were able to quickly open up and provide the solutions to the entire student population, not just the hostel students. We were a part of the COVID task force with the government of Karnataka, where we helped them convert PGs, resident welfare associations, and hotels into COVID care centers, monitors patient complaints, track beds, and things like that. So we were able to quickly, kind of shift and kind of like really move fast during this period, so that we were able to pivot, I'd say, fairly well during COVID.
Right, right. Again, as an opportunity, because what you did in COVID, very curious to understand, because it's a management system at the end of the day, right? Haven't you ever thought of getting into the travel segment for the same?
I mean, we have definitely thought about the other use cases that could, or the other industries that where it could be used. Definitely, travel being one of them. But for us, the safest and the most well-known area, without having to do a lot of experimentation at that given point in 2020, was going back to our existing customers, seeing how we can help them, and reuse some of our functionalities to kind of provide it to the same set of university schools and colleges. And also kind of how can we help with COVID, right? Because that's the main topic of discussion, and that's the main affecting factor that even till today we face. Right. So what we decided is, when we started seeing universities and schools slowly opening up, started with medical colleges. So we started reaching out to our medical colleges. We started asking them to start using SpaceBasic. We also added some of the functionalities that could help with effective COVID management. Mm-hmm. So, for example, integrating with IoT, where temperature checks can be recorded. If it's above X temperature, it throws an alert and things like that. So we have to get a little innovative and really see the need of the hour and how does the product fit the need of the hour. Mm-hmm. And that's how we were able to we're recouping now, given COVID. I think things have started slowly opening up, and I see that things are getting better, and we're trying to be ahead of that curve and try to be there during this process.
Right. Just going back to, again, from the universities and the institute's point of view. So let's talk about your first pitch. You did mention about, your pilots, but let's talk about that first pitch and that interesting pitch you made to your universities. Firstly, adopting to the technology itself would have been a major challenge, I'm assuming, with universities. So what was your pitch like, and what was the challenges that you faced as you moved on?
For me, selling was completely new, right? I come with a product background, so actually selling was an acquired skill. So it was very hard for me to pitch as a first-time entrepreneur. It's passion sales. At the end of the day, what we sold was out of passion. So, when entrepreneurs sell, it's passion sales, right? It's nothing to do with, it's less to do with the product, more to do with what we believe it can do, right? So for me, it was mostly kind of because I was a part of the due diligence and I kind of understood their problem. We were selling the problem, not so much the solution, just how can we help them manage this problem effectively. And so most of them kind of understood. It wasn't too hard for them to understand and really see what we were talking about. So I think that's how we got the initial first few opportunities of piloting and kind of having the product to go with the initial set of customers. But I think for me, in terms of selling per se, that's a skill that I acquired on the job. But what I did was definitely, talk to them about the problems and also say, hey, it's okay because other people are also having the similar problem, but we have a solution. And this is how we can help. So I guess that's how I did it.
And did you face rejections from the university?
Of course.
Let's talk about that. And why do you think particularly they didn't want to automate this process?
So I think that's human behavior. At the end of the day, we are set on our processes, and change is not something that is easily acceptable, right? But by people in general. And more so universities and colleges, because one, the people who manage it are slightly older and they have done this over and over again for many, many years. Right. And they're set in their way. So learning something new that challenges the way that they're doing, and they're not very sure whether it's going to work or not. I think that's the one of the biggest apprehensions that these people have, and people in general, correct? So I think that was the biggest breakthrough. The point where we had to break through. But what we started to do is, at the end of the day, if wardens, right, they're the guys who use the product the most because they use it every single day to interact with the students, with the parents, and vendors and management and all of that. And we also saw that the cell phone penetration in India in 2017 and 2018 was above 18%. And what that says is, in any market, if it goes above 18%, then the adoption is quicker. So one of my advisors actually gave us this piece of information that was very interesting, because that's the time when we started kind of, selling SpaceBasic, or that's when we launched it. That's when we went to market. And for us, at the end of the day, if we can convince them that this is going to reduce your work and not increase your work, it's not you have to do this and on top of that use this. I think that's where we started. So with wardens, etc., what we realized is they wanted as little touch points as possible. They don't want to talk to 100 parents, 100 students every day. If you can just give them a phone and say, hey, just do it here, just by clicking these few buttons, or they're like, oh, cool, that's it, And I think that's what we kind of captured on, and that's how we kind of ended up kind of convincing them that, this is how it works.
Okay. And which has been the most difficult zone in terms of universities or the areas where the acceptance is low?
I think the most common point of rejection usually goes to saying, hey, we already have this, So when someone says we already have this, what they're talking about is they have a bigger enterprise solution that has 100 features that does mostly all of the 100 activities on a very high level. And we know that because we've studied these systems. But the usual notion is, hey, we have this, or we have a hostel module in this bigger application. But the truth is, those modules do not deep dive into day-to-day activities. So, for us to kind of get through that barrier initially was a problem. Or the other thing, we usually hear is, oh, it's okay, we'll build it on our own. So we always go back to those customers in a year and say, hey, it's been a year, you guys have not built it on your own. Why don't you just use this? Right. So that's worked. So that's worked. And also the fact that we have, good clientele, and we've built on that, and we're able to use that as reference now when we, sell to new customers. And I also think technology with COVID, what has happened is I feel like technology adoption has kind of been forced upon everybody, and they're kind of getting okay with it. I think education sector was probably one of the last sectors to adopt technology completely. And I feel like they're opening up now. So, that's definitely promising.
Right. And did you also provide trainings for the staff members and demos and other aspects like that?
Absolutely. So the way we onboard is, our sales cycle is usually a couple of weeks, 2 to 4 weeks, after which we try to onboard. It's simple. The way we've built it is when we give a demo, we say, hey, you use WhatsApp, then you can use SpaceBasic. It's pretty much as simple as that, And so then we just walk them through. So we have a demo with the staff, and students are quick learners. They don't need no demo. It's kind of self-serve on the application as a first-time user. Right. But yeah, we definitely handhold staff and management initially so that they can get a hold of how to work around it.
Right. Makes sense. And, regulations is another aspect of setting up anything related to government-led institutes, right? You're of course recognized also by your associations with UN and the government of India. But were there any regulations to follow, process to regroup on, or features to customize on when it came to government-led institutes?
Features to customize is it's like a must, for almost every university or school or college you go to. But the way we dealt with that is we built the product in a heavily configurable way. What I mean by that is it's pretty much you put the pieces together the way you like, and it's going to work like that. So I think that's also one of the reasons which led to our early success, because usually what happens, and what I've heard is when you go to universities, they say, make this change and come back, and then we'll see if we can work with you. But the way we dealt with it is, hey, I can configure it in front of you right now and show you how it works. Will you sign up? And that's something I learned with my organization that I worked in Sydney, because the way they built their product as well was extremely configurable. So that was the mindset, from day one when we kind of did the architecture and when we started building SpaceBasic as the product. So I think that has definitely been one of, a critical factor to acquiring and kind of servicing more customers.
Right.
But there are a couple of regulations. The usual questions are around data security and things like that.
Mhm.
And we, at the end of the day, with universities and schools, and data is everything, right? And it's students' data. So we use AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, one of the most secure cloud services that's out there, and a lot of elements of AWS security. So the way we see it is the data is secure. So it's really just convincing them and kind of making sure that we have the protocols in place.
Right. Makes sense. And you've seen a growing trend in the student housing industry and also the hostel management software category. There are a lot of players today. How do you differentiate your product with your competition?
Student housing has definitely, it's in the rise. We see a lot of that it was at its peak. It still is upcoming. And I've kind of seen that trend, and most of these people end up building their own custom software because at the end of the day, the way they operate is different from each other. But what we're building at SpaceBasic is a SaaS solution, completely cloud-based SaaS solution, configure on the go, that really works with challenges of operations and communication within your community, right, on day-to-day basis. And that's what we're building. We're not so much a feature-driven or a kind of, enterprise solutions today are built on, 100 modules, etc. We want to solve one problem and we want to solve it really well. And that's where, our area of focus lies, which is with student housing and dormitories.
Right. And how profitable is a product like this? Not for you, but for universities when they integrate it. You did mention it saves time at multiple levels for them, but do you have any stats stories to power up your success story for any university with regards to profitability?
Absolutely. Just in terms of, let's say, food wastage, right? So we have this offering called as a cafeteria manager where students have to RSVP saying, yes, I'm going to come for breakfast tomorrow. No, I'm not coming for lunch tomorrow, so on and so forth. And when they do walk into their university, to their cafeteria or mess, as we call it, they scan the QR. And then we know that the student has RSVP'd and has come in. So you can imagine before this, how they do is they say, okay, this total student strength is 800 students, so we're going to cook for all of them.
Right.
But what we realized is about 20% of students usually don't show up one or more of the meals. So that's about almost 100 to 200 plates of food every single day.
Wow.
Right? And you multiply that by 365 days. And this kind of insight, you probably wouldn't, not probably, but you most definitely wouldn't have gotten by following the same kind of process and methodologies. What we're doing differently here is what we want to do with the information is just not allow them to check in and go away. We want to tell you the story of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and how you can optimize. So in this process, we've been able to save about 20-25% of the food wastage, as well as the expenses related to food. So insights like this, when we give them case studies and actually show them and demonstrate them, they instantly get it because these are the things that they all go through.
Right. Okay. So students are like fantastic marketing and sales professionals themselves for any brand. Though your product is B2B, does SpaceBasic offer opportunities for students and management as affiliate programs or referral programs?
Yes, that's something we've wanted to do for the longest time. And what we also do is we have student ambassadors and we always get feedback from them. We always ask them, how can we improve this? What can we add that is going to make your life easier and things like that? So we have a couple of sessions with some of the students in the universities we work with. So we do consciously take their feedback and try to improvise the product. But our goal really this year is to kind of have them more included in our process and kind of have more opportunities for them to work with us. So that's definitely one of our goals.
Oh. Great stuff, Madhavi. That kind of ends our first round of conversation. Now it's time for the next round. A little lighter, a little fun. And this is the rapid fire round.
Okay.
So, ready for this?
Yes, let's do this.
Okay. As an entrepreneur, your golden tip for aspiring entrepreneurs.
Don't give up. Just be at it.
Okay. 3 reasons why those who aren't your clients yet should inquire about SpaceBasic.
Well, if you want to save money, if you want to make life easy and for your students as well as your staff, and at the end of the day, if you really want to get insights on how you're doing and how you can do better, they should sign up for SpaceBasic.
Okay. What's one thing you absolutely love about your job?
I pretty much, love it. It's a combined kind of. I don't know if I can isolate anything. I love the fact that it allows me to push my boundaries and kind of keep challenging the things that I thought I can't do when I end up doing it.
Okay. Your favorite review or testimonial received till date?
There's this one review, one of our customers that says, very candid. He just looks around his office and he says, "Hey, look, there's no paper." And he's like, "Thanks to SpaceBasic." So I love that. I thought that was great.
Awesome. Before going for funding, 3 things you recommend entrepreneurs should go through.
Definitely find a problem that you are going to solve, and customers are willing to pay for it. That's key. And I would say also make sure you're able to kind of get in early revenue and kind of show that you have that, customers are willing to pay for your product, not just one size, but different sizes or different types of customers. That's definitely one thing. And when you go for funding, you want to get funded by a company or an angel or a VC who understands your vision and who will support you kind of achieve that.
Right. Okay. If you never took the leap of faith and continued in Australia, what would your story be today?
I'm 9 to 5, I guess, a regular 9 to 5 job. I might have liked it too. I don't know, because for lack of not knowing better. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what I would have done. Okay. And probably married and fulfill my mom's dreams of being married. But yeah, I guess that's what I would have done.
Awesome. Though you said that you're not feature driven, your favorite feature on the platform or the favorite capability on the SpaceBasic platform?
My favorite capability of SpaceBasic is its ability to really take the data and make that useful information, whatever that data could be. So the fact that it's humanizing it and really, simplifying that to a problem or to a statement is what I like about the product.
Okay. And finally, what's next for you as well as SpaceBasic?
Well, the goal for both of us, SpaceBasic and me this year for 2021 is to positively impact 1 million users' lives, with SpaceBasic and digitize their living.
Okay. Fantastic. Well done, Madhavi. That brings us to the end of the second segment. You've done well. Very prompt answer.
Thank you. Thanks.
Now it's time for the last segment of the show. And this is where we take a question from our follower across platforms. And this question is from Surbhi Kulkarni, who says, "I'm looking to build a SaaS product for auto parking facilities in the country. As an entrepreneur who's a technology enthusiast, could you share your personal learnings to help me grow and plan my business over the next 3 years to become profitable?"
Sure. So the main thing, the underlining factor here would be to validate your product as much as you can, carry out rigorous due diligence as much as you can, and really speak with potential customers and understand the problem and how big of a problem it is. You're not solving it for one customer, but you're solving it for multiple customers of different segments or sizes. So you might want to validate all of that. So I think that is about 70% of the challenge. The other 30% are just logistics where you really figure out, how to do it and things like that, and you have help for it. But the biggest problem or the biggest challenge as an entrepreneur is to find a real problem and to find, to build the solution and find your initial first-time customers who are willing to pay for it.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well done, Madhavi. That brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you for introducing us to the world of SpaceBasic and also introducing us to your entrepreneurial journey. I hope you enjoyed your time on the show.
I did. Thank you so much for having me, Dakshin. This was a pleasure.
Lovely. I wish you and SpaceBasic all the very best for this year.
Thank you to you too, and thanks for having me again.
Well, isn't it amazing and inspiring to listen to classic problem-solving ideas and entrepreneurs like Madhavi? So what did you learn from today's story? Share it at thedeliberatetalks@gmail.com, and don't forget to follow The Deliberate Talks on the audio and the social media channels. Joining next Monday for another episode with another expert. And until then, don't forget to inspire and be inspired.